Let's get rolling. So we got a few minutes after 11. So welcome everybody to the Edge call today. Obviously, we are continuing to bring amazing guest speakers to enhance your guys' business and add value. This is obviously broker agnostic and open to everybody. We just want to make sure we're bringing the heat in the real estate space and bringing as much value as we can to you guys. Today is a pretty special guest speaker. I've been personally working with Chris for a couple years, and he's had a huge impact on, my life, both personally and in business. And it's really around the framework of just living a healthy lifestyle. And that can go into everything with, sleep and routine and exercise and what we put in our bodies. And I think that one of the key things, especially in real estate and entrepreneurship, is if you're able to, have a very stable health and balance as much as we can, because we're in a very unbalanced business, you can really unlock a new level in your business when you can take care of yourself also. And I think a lot of people that are not in that space with living a healthy lifestyle,
Oh yeah, I'm on a webinar. What's up?
You probably always feel like you're behind, right? So today we've got a few questions for Chris to kind of break the ice a little bit. If you guys have questions, don't be shy. You don't have to wait till the end on this particular call. Just drop them in the chat, and then we can kind of go back and forth. So yeah, Chris, welcome, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the call. Riley's told me about how high-powered of a group this is. So excited to get involved and just, share some thoughts and ideas and concepts that I've been practicing for a good 3 decades of my life. I'm 48 years old. Born and raised from Boston, Massachusetts, live in California in Manhattan Beach, been out here for a little over 20 years now. But yeah, I've been in the health and wellness space for 3 decades. And it's something that's become very passionate and near and dear to my heart and to my lifestyle. And something that I've been able to fortunately be able to build a business around to just help inspire and support and facilitate quality lives for individuals and whatever they're trying to pursue. I find that most people usually feel that, health and wellness is easy for me, or the things that I incorporate are pretty easy for me just because I've been doing this for so long. And that often allows me to just kind of share a brief story about how I got into health and wellness at a very early age. There were 2 very critical moments in my life that sort of put me on this trajectory. At 16 years old, I was misdiagnosed with childhood leukemia. It was a brief moment, but for a few days there, I thought it was over. And so in that moment, it was sort of apparent at a very young age, the reality of my mortality. And also the reality that, doctors aren't perfect, and that if I want to take care of myself, it's important for me to really dig in and learn as much as I can, because nobody's going to take better care of me than myself. So that really scared me and forced me into this space of really digging in. At that time, I was 16. We didn't have computers, and we didn't have, the internet to really dig into the way we do today. So I was reading lots of books and magazines and just educating myself on nutrition and supplementation and exercise. And that sort of developed my passion of just wanting to really learn how to take care of my body as best as possible so that I could have a good quality health span and lifespan. I played Division I college hockey. So growing up, hockey was my sport. Thought I might potentially go pro. I ended up freshman year going into college, and after playing years in high school where you play against 16 to 18-year-olds, in college you're playing against a lot bigger guys. And so I was getting knocked around quite a bit. I was small at that time. I was about 5'10", maybe 170 pounds. And so my coach after my freshman year had said, look, if you want to come back and play next year, you got to put on some more strength and some more muscle. Otherwise, your career might be over. So that was very threatening to me. So that summer I went home. I spent my whole summer in the gym and focused on nutrition. I put on 30 pounds in 3 months and came back and was a top performer on the team ongoing, and was able to, have a great college career. But that also really inspired me to realize how easily we can change and adapt our bodies if we provide the right raw materials and provide the right environment. So those 2 critical points in my life, the fear of mortality at a young age, and also understanding the ability for us to manipulate the way we look, feel, and function very quickly and easily if we know how to apply the science. Those things really impacted and inspired me to want to just take a leap of moving towards this space of health and fitness for a lifetime. And so I've used a lot of those principles to be able to help inspire other people along the way. And what it really taught me at that young age was that there is a price to pay for everything. And in a young age, moving towards, my 20s and my 30s, I started to think, well, I'd rather pay right now and make sacrifices for my health than to pay and make sacrifices for my illness down the road. But in growing up as an athlete, performance athletes, I was a competitive bodybuilder for a short period of time. Those were things that were really exciting and fun for me. But as I moved into my older years and started to move into entrepreneurship, I started to realize that, as a performance athlete in the past, I still stay in pretty good shape all year long, but I realized that my sport now is really business. And so all the things I do in my life today support and facilitate how do I get the best performance out of myself, out of my body, out of my mind for business, which is something that I love. I support the way I eat. I support the way I train. I support the way I sleep. All these things support how I show up in business because that is now effectively my sport. And I absolutely love it. I've fallen in love with the process. So these things are just part of who I am. It's part of my DNA. And so I want to share just a few of my top 5 principles that I think are really effective and important as you draw some of the correlations from like sports to business athlete and how I see most of the people that I work with, because the majority of the clients that I work with are high-level entrepreneurs, people who have spent a lot of time building their wealth and success at the expense of their health and wellness. And now that they've achieved a lot of things they've wanted in their life, they've got the homes, they've got the cars, they've got the families, they've got all the things they enjoy, they're not able to enjoy it at the best of their abilities because they're still lacking health. And so now they're trying to figure out, how do I integrate, health and wellness into this existing infrastructure that seems a bit chaotic and stressful, that you can't really let go of because this is what it becomes your livelihood. So some of the disciplines I think that are important to talk about. Number 1, discipline beats motivation, both in the gym and in the boardroom. Showing up consistently, even when you don't feel like it, is what separates success from failure. And that happens both with your health as well as with business. Number 2, recovery is non-negotiable. Whether it's recovering after a tough game or a high-stakes meeting, proper sleep, stress management, these things are what help keep you performing at your absolute best. Number 3, the power of a playbook. Athletes rely on game plans. Entrepreneurs need systems. A structured approach to your day is what makes chaos more manageable. Time management, stress management, things of that nature. Number 4, adaptability is key. No game or business strategy survives unchanged. Flexibility and learning to pivot under pressure is where resilience is really built. And number 5, your team matters on the field and in business. You're only as strong as the people around you. Choose teammates who elevate your performance. And so I think that these are the principles that really help to bridge the gap between what we might consider like athletics to entrepreneurship to peak performance and lifestyle. And it's just trying to find ways to simplify this, to find an integration so that getting up and hitting a morning routine, getting to the gym, thinking about the foods you eat, prioritizing, recovery protocols like getting body work done, massages, or doing some mobility and stretching, prioritizing in bed times to get good quality sleep, thinking about your supplementation, considering doing blood work and managing your hormones, like understanding all of that. That is so important to really simplifying your life in a way that things just start to operate and flow versus you trying to force things into position. And I've just found that to be a very effective tool, not only for my own life, but also for several clients that I work with in that whole strategy. Riley is a great example of that. He's a very aggressive, hungry entrepreneur. He's young, but he's fiery and he's mature for his age, and he's really looking to strive for bigger and better. And so with that comes, can come a lot of chaos. And if you're not really great at time blocking, not just time management, but time blocking, which is a different reframing of time management. Time blocking is knowing exactly where everything fits into your day and holding yourself accountable and sticking to that game plan. But then at the same time, if things don't go according to that game plan, you've got to learn how to master that art of adjustment and know how to make those pivots and changes so that you're just moving pieces around in your day and still accomplishing everything, as opposed to letting things fall off and drop off where you're dropping the ball and missing certain key components to your day that help you bridge and gain that compounded interest day over day in terms of how you look, how you feel, and how you function in business and in your personal life. So, I could sit here and talk for hours on this stuff, things that I'm really passionate about. But what I prefer to do on these calls is really transition this into a Q&A session. I want to hear any questions that are on your mind. Everything is on the table. And I think it'd be great for us just to get the conversations going and just talk about, because oftentimes I find one person's thinking about something, usually everybody is, and I want to be able to just provide that value for you. So why don't we, you want to kick it off, Riley?
Yeah, I think a good question that is applicable to everybody, and it's something that's becoming a little bit more mainstream through media and different people talking on social media and stuff. But what are some common misconceptions around food and what is actually good for us? How can you actually read labels properly in the grocery store? And something that I've learned, even kind of going through this, 95% of the food in the grocery store is garbage, like 95% of it. And we all eat it. We all consume it. Some of us on the call have children. And I think sometimes, it's easy to give the goldfish crackers or this or this, but we don't even really know what's in, like what the ingredients are and what it's actually doing long-term to your body. And if it's your kids also, it's the same kind of deal. But the way that the food industry is structured, there's some incredible marketing out there to have us buy products that look appealing and the labels look like they're good for us, and they're really not. So I think that would be a good place to start, because every one of us is going to go to a grocery store this week, and every one of us is going to pick different items depending on, what we think about those items or if we think they're healthy or not. But I think that is a really good place to start, because like I said, everybody's going to go to the grocery store this week at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the most important thing to think of first when it comes to nutrition and food is that food can either be medicine or it can be poison for our bodies, right? Like food can genuinely heal our bodies, or it could take our bodies down. There's a lot of times that clients will come into my program right out of the gate, and they might have, might be battling or dealing with some things like high heavy metal exposure, like mercury and arsenic. And I'll prescribe them garlic and cilantro, because those are two heavy metal detoxifiers. And if you incorporate those on a regular basis, they can do a great job at helping to remove those heavy metals and get your body back into a healthier state. Mercury in the body is a neurotoxin, so it affects the brain. It affects your endocrine system, which is your hormone balance. It can affect your metabolism. It can have really negative downstream effects. So just to give you an example, to kind of echo the thoughts that food can either be medicine or poison. I think where, when it comes to ingredients and label reading, there's so much detail and information that it'd be hard for me to go over everything in general unless there were some specific questions. But I can tell you that the front of the packaging, exactly like you said, these companies are great masters at marketing. So the front of the packaging is all marketing. You see something that says sugar-free, keto, gluten-free. They're putting all the fancy buzzwords on there that they know, paleo, that they know everybody's into. But what you really need to pay attention to is the ingredients, because ingredients is king. It's the only thing that matters. So if you see something you really like a buddy of mine just sent me, he's like, "Oh, bro, I love these pretzels, man." He's like, "Can you take a look at the ingredients for me?" So I had him send me the ingredients. And on the front, they look like they're clean and healthy and no big deal. But you flip it over on the back, it's got canola oil, palm oil, vegetable oil. It's got guar gum, xanthan gum, acacia gum, all these gums and fillers and seed oils that are super inflammatory to the body and to the gut. So, I mean, there's just so much that you have to really learn and pay attention to. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's very cluttered in terms of trying to educate yourself. But as a general rule of thumb, just talking about the oils and gums, if you see anything with gum in it, you want to try to avoid that, because that is a filling agent that has been approved by the FDA that they use as a way to add stickiness or texture or density to a product, but it's massively inflammatory to the gut. From an oils perspective, if you don't see anything that says olive oil, avocado oil, or coconut oil, stay away from it. Any other oils you want to avoid. There's grapeseed oil, there's palm oil, there's vegetable oil. So the three oils that if you're looking, if there's any oils in any of your foods, the things you want that are approved, just to keep it simple: olive oil, coconut oil, what did I just say? Olive oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil. Sorry, spacing. Yeah, those are the only three oils that you really that you want to look for as approved oils in foods. Anything else, you want to consider a different product. And the good news is that there are some companies out there now that are paying attention to this, and so you can find good alternatives. Riley, working with me, it gives you an opportunity that, for example, another good example would be like sriracha. I'm sure a lot of people like sriracha on this call. Well, sriracha seems innocent, like an innocent hot sauce, but it actually has xanthan gum in it. So to make it a little bit thicker of a consistency, it's inflammatory to the gut. There's a company out there called Yellowbird. They sell at Whole Foods, and they make a sriracha type product that tastes very similar, but it's anti-inflammatory ingredients. There's no bad seed oils. There's no xanthan gums. There's nothing in it. So it's approved, and there's a lot of substitutes out there. So again, it'd be hard for me to go over the entire food list, but I think those are things that are important when it comes to ingredients. When it comes to overall foods in general, I really prioritize a lot of anti-inflammatory proteins. So I think about grass-fed meats like grass-fed beef, steak, lamb, bison, venison, elk, or we prioritize wild-caught fish. So those are the things we really try to stick to. Chicken can be incorporated, minimally, because chickens eat corn, grain, and soy. Chickens are often eating GMO, corn, grain, and soy. Corn, grain, and soy is really high on omega-6, and omega-6 is really inflammatory to the body. These grass-fed meats are really high on omega-3, which are anti-inflammatory, so less offensive to the body from an inflammatory standpoint. So I think from a protein standpoint, those are things that, you'd want to think about and pay attention to. Eggs, if you're going to incorporate eggs, I'd incorporate them intermittently and look for organic pasture-raised eggs. Again, these things aren't going to be perfect, but, meaning there are some pasture-raised eggs out there that they claim it's pasture-raised chickens, but are they really? We don't know. So when it comes down to it, you try to make the best choices you can. Usually the dose determines the poison. So the reason why I say chicken is because some people want to have a little variety in their diet from time to time. So if you have chicken, pasture-raised organic chicken from time to time, it's not going to be very offensive in terms of, affecting the body from an inflammatory standpoint if it gets dropped in on occasion, as opposed to if you were eating chicken all the time, you're going to get this accumulation of inflammation building up in the body that may eventually start to wreak havoc on your metabolic system, your endocrine system, and your digestive system. So, I know this is a lot of information. I want to pause there. If anybody has any specific questions about that, you can follow up, let me know. Otherwise, if there's other questions, we can move on.
Yeah, if you guys have something, drop it in the chat. If not, I've got a follow-up question that leads into what you talked about.
Alyssa, you have a question?
Oh, I just put it in the chat. It's on juicing. You said garlic and cilantro being a good heavy metal detoxer. Yeah. Now my brain is running a million miles a minute.
So what specifically is your question around that?
Just thoughts on
juicing?
Yeah, like drinking your vitamin stuff.
Yeah. So in general, I don't love juicing across the board, just because when it comes to juicing, you're extracting the juice from a fruit or from a vegetable, and what you stand to gain from actually eating that fruit or vegetable is a lot of the fiber that you're missing because you're extracting the juice only, right? The thing I do like juicing is celery. So celery is a massive anti-inflammatory agent, and it's also loaded with hydrochloric acid, which is our stomach digesting acid. And so I'll actually recommend clients who come into the program initially as a way to really attack their inflammation right out of the get-go is the first thing in the morning, I'll have them drink 8 ounces of celery juice. Just celery juice. You want to get it into the body first thing uninterrupted in the intestinal tract. So it gets to go in and line the intestinal tract with all those beautiful anti-inflammatory properties. It front loads the gut with all that hydrochloric acid so that throughout the day, you have more of a supply of hydrochloric acid for better nutrient breakdown and absorption into the gut. Okay. But I think from a juicing standpoint, you get some of the nutrients from it. I think with fruit in particular, you get a lot more of like the glucose and the sugar minus the fiber, which isn't great because then you get these big glucose spikes. You want the fiber to help slow down the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. So from that standpoint, I think you're better off like eating fruit if you're trying to get like some micronutrients and some antioxidants from the fruit. If vegetables are something that you struggle with, like you could juice the vegetables, but again, if you're juicing primarily, let's say you're juicing for weight loss, right? One of the benefits you get from eating vegetables versus juicing them is that the fiber helps create more satiation, right? So if you're just juicing, then you're getting some of the micronutrients from the vegetable, but you're missing all the fiber, and you might actually find yourself being more hungry unless you're just, you're putting on like the mental toughness cap and just like pushing through and be like, man, I've been juicing for 7 days straight, haven't had any food. It's like, you can do that for a period of time, but that's not a long-term plan, and on top of that, it's like, whatever you gain from doing like a water fast or a juice fast, you got to go back to regular life eventually. So it's like, it's kind of null and void. The idea is that you want to learn habits that you can maintain long-term that has really great synergy and then helps you achieve your goals. I don't want to get lost in the weeds because I could talk about more and more beyond this, but does that answer your question?
Another one here, Chris, is Naveed said, thoughts on chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll, yeah, it's a great micronutrient. It helps to oxygenate the blood. It's a great antioxidant. So no issues with incorporating something like that. I would add that into like a protein shake once a day. Something really simple. I don't think you're missing anything by not incorporating it. But at the same, if you're living a healthy quality lifestyle, but there's no harm in adding it in.
Okay.
Chris,
I think
Oh,
go ahead, Raquel.
I just wanted to ask, what's your thoughts on intermittent fasting? Are there benefits to it? Are there any pros, the cons?
Yeah, so intermittent, it's a common question that comes up. I think it has its pros and it has its cons. I think intermittent fasting can work effectively for people who are trying to lose weight, people who are very, very busy and are trying to figure out, how do I incorporate a balanced meal plan into a very busy day where I don't have time to eat 4 or 5 times a day, right? Where it can have a con is if a client of mine is really interested in trying to put on more muscle and really trying to build more strength in their body, it becomes very challenging because you need more runway in your day to get more calories in your body versus trying to shove them all into like a 4 to 6 hour window. Very, very difficult to get those calories. Oftentimes leaving people feeling full and bloated and difficult for your body to break down and process all that nutrients in a very small window. So I think, the competing conversation around that is that when your digestive system is constantly working, that can also drive up inflammation a bit. Like there's an inflammatory response that happens in the body while your intestinal tract is working. So there are some benefits from an intermittent fasting standpoint. If you're trying to drive down any kind of like gut bloat or distension or like inflammation in your gut, breaking down into an intermittent fasting cycle can help relieve some of that. But if you're somebody who's like really interested in trying to put on, a decent amount of muscle and strength, it would hinder that benefit in that process. The other reason maybe you might want to not consider intermittent fasting just depends on, where you're at in terms of like, there's nuances in terms of how their days are structured and their energy systems. Some people might wake up and their day is going as soon as they get up. Like they're just off to the races. And at that point, like you might need some fuel for the brain. Like you might need some glucose, you might need some protein, some fats, like some carbs to get the brain functioning and working. It gets very nuanced, but you can use intermittent fasting to bring it back around as an effective strategy if weight loss is part of your process, and if time constraints are really challenging in your day, then there's ways to incorporate that effectively.
Nice. All right, we got some rapid fire questions coming in. So Lisa says, what blood, etc. testing do you have your clients do?
I usually have my clients do it's called a CBC panel, which basically covers all of your basics like your liver, your kidney, your hemoglobin, your red blood cell, white blood cells. Then I have them check cholesterol. I check all of their hormones from thyroid, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. I have them check their C-reactive protein and their homocysteine, which is your inflammatory markers. I will generally have them look for heavy metals if that's something that's like a secondary test. I think the initials are more of like the hormone and the basic blood work. But at the same time, I personally have two practitioners that I work with on my team. One of them is a nutritional scientist. He works with, he's contracted by the U.S. military. He works with all the professional sports teams in the U.S. He works with A-list celebrities like the Kardashians, where, we do deep dive blood work on all heavy metals. We do amino acid profiles to see if your body is absorbing all of your nutrients and protein properly. I mean, there's different levels of testing. It's kind of nuanced, it depends on where each individual is at. I would say I'm usually surprised at how many people don't get blood work done. As entrepreneurs, and we think about this as business athletes, right? Your numbers of your business inside and out. Your numbers in your bank account. Your numbers in your investment portfolios, right? How many people know their numbers in their blood work? Not many, which is kind of scary. But this day and age, really what's starting to kind of come about, the new flex, and especially in the fitness industry, the new flex is showing your blood work, not showing your bank account. It's like, hey, check out my testosterone levels. Hey, look at where my my inflammatory marker, my inflammation's way low in my body. You see my cholesterol? My cholesterol is perfect. So I think it's basic blood work, like for your basic vitals and organs. And on top of that, the hormones are really, really important to know, because there's nothing that gives you a better indication of what's going on than taking a peek under the hood. Once you have that, you can get way more specific with how we incorporate, certain foods or any adjustments we make there, or certain supplements we might want to incorporate, or even like certain protocols. Again, like going back to the heavy metal, garlic and cilantro are two things that we use to kind of drive that down, but also getting into saunas, for 20 minutes at a time, a few days a week are great ways to also detox the body of heavy metals.
Okay, we got two questions, and I think you could probably segue both. So Courtney asked, do you have a favorite protein powder / recommendation? And then Rose asked, do you recommend 1 gram of protein per body weight? What are your recommendations for protein, carb, and fat macro intake? Obviously, that's probably going to vary person to person, but you could probably segue those two questions together.
Yeah. So generally, when a client comes into the program from a protein powder perspective, I will usually introduce a protein powder, because trying to hit the macros can be challenging just with food. And, our food starts to get a little bit limited in terms of the scope of what we incorporate when we're trying to get the body really healthy and heal it from the inside out. So the protein powder helps give us a little bit more of a range. I usually incorporate a plant-based protein powder right out of the gate. And the hard thing with protein powders is that there are a lot of garbage formulations out there. There's a lot of great companies, but there's a lot of garbage formulations. So the brand that I like is called Previnex. It's one of the best plant-based protein powders out there. They provide what's called a certificate of analysis, and they're very upfront about that, where most companies don't. And the certificate of analysis shows that they're below the thresholds of the heavy metal toxicities of their sourcing. So you're getting good quality protein. They also don't incorporate any gums or any fillers in their protein powder. So it's a squeaky clean plant-based protein. The reason why I go plant-based right out of the gate is because whey protein, which is a really great quality protein, if you're using a good quality grass-fed whey protein, you have the ability to gain some great amino acid profiles from the whey protein. Whey protein is like a pro and a con. Whey is a dairy derivative, which can be a bit inflammatory to the body. But if you're somebody who's done a great job at reducing inflammation, your body can tolerate some inflammatory response, knowing that you're also getting a really good benefit from it as well. So the whey protein can be effectively used a little further down the line. Once we've done a great job of reducing inflammation in the body, you can then start to introduce a combination of the plant-based and the whey protein, so you can get sort of the best of both worlds without really driving up inflammation over the top, if that makes sense. But Previnex is probably my top brand for plant-based protein. And on the grass-fed whey protein, there's a couple I like. There's Transparent Labs. They make a really great grass-fed whey protein. There's also another company called Levels that makes a great grass-fed whey protein. Both of them, I believe, they source their grass-fed whey from New Zealand, which is a top quality sourcing location. And they also provide great certifications on all of their products. So they're GMP lab tested, and they're really, really good quality products. As far as the protein, the rule of thumb is usually 1 gram of protein per pound of target body weight. So if right now I weigh 195 pounds. If I wanted to try to get to 200, then I would push 200 grams plus to try to get to that 200 mark, right? If I'm 195 and I'm trying to get down to 185, I can effectively drop my protein within that 185 range if I want to. Reason why protein is king is because it's in order to build muscle, you need a chemical stimulus and you need a mechanical stimulus to build muscle. The mechanical stimulus is the resistance that you put on the muscle when you're in the gym lifting weights. So you need a really good mechanical stimulus to generate that signal for your body to want to build muscle. And then after that mechanical stimulus is generated, you need the chemical stimulus, which is the protein that's going to come in and help manufacture that muscle building. So if you're missing one of the two, it's going to be really hard for you to build muscle. But in regards to like the grams of protein, the goal is really trying to hit those targets. And what I find for a lot of people is that they undershoot their protein and they overshoot on carbs and fats and sugars. And so oftentimes you'll see the body composition not really meeting their goals of what they're looking for because they're getting so full from foods that don't really provide the right macronutrient of what they need for building muscle. And so when I tell people to make a shift in their mindset of how they approach their plate, so if they have a plate full of food, prioritize your protein first. Get that main macronutrient in first. If you leave a little bit of carbs or some vegetables or some other things on the plate, no problem. But if you're leaving protein on the plate, you're selling yourself short. And why that's important, and not just for men, but also for women. I know there's sort of a negative connotation for women thinking like, well, I don't want to eat so much protein and lift heavy weights because I don't want to get big and muscly. You want more muscle because muscle actually serves as an accelerant for your metabolism. The more muscle you have on your body, the faster your resting metabolic rate will be, meaning your metabolism will be working really hard while you're sitting here doing nothing, and you'll be burning more calories, oftentimes fat calories, right? So the less muscle you have on your body, if you have less muscle on your body, what happens is that your body starts to pare down its energy resources because it feels it's going into self-preservation mode. It doesn't have as much muscle, so we need to store as much fat as we can to preserve this individual. It doesn't know that, you live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and you're successful, you have access to food whenever you want. It's thinking like you're just out there in the world and it's just operating biomechanically, physiologically, what's happening. this person's not as active. They don't have as much muscle. Apparently they don't need it. They don't need as much resources. We got to preserve their body. So it slows everything down. So the more protein you consume closer to your target of your goal, the more muscle you'll maintain, the faster your resting metabolic rate will be, the faster your metabolism will be, the happier most people usually are with their body composition. Does that sum it all up for everyone?
Yeah, I think that's solid. That's got two more, kind of a parlay question too. So Rose asks, what's your recommendation for carbohydrates? What are better options for carbs? And then that kind of dovetails into Raquel's question on what's your thoughts on carb cycling?
Yeah. So carbs in general, I'm a big advocate of carbs. We need carbs. One, for carbs provide glycogen, which is the fancy term for glucose or sugar. It gives our body energy. Carbohydrates like potatoes and rice, those are called complex carbohydrates because they take about 3 to 4 hours to break down into a usable energy source, into a usable glucose sugar source, so our bodies can use them. We need carbohydrates for cognitive function, for the brain. We need carbohydrates to store in our muscles, to give our muscles the energy to exert in the gym. It also makes the muscles look a little more full and round. Oftentimes, people will go on these like carb binges, or you go away on vacation and you find yourself like going off the rails a bit with food and starting to eat more carbs in general. And you come back feeling like you gained a bunch of weight. And really what that is just water weight. Carbs attract more water into the body, into the muscles. So it makes the muscles look a little more full and round. And it can also cause the body just to hold on to more water in general. So that's why they kind of have a negative stigma. But carbs are actually really, really important in the process of giving us more energy so that we can think more clearly, stronger cognitive function, and have more energy and strength in the gym. That way, carbs indirectly help support muscle growth, because with more carbs in your body, you can lift heavier weight. Lifting heavier weight helps you build more muscle, right? So the carbs don't help you actually manufacture and build more muscle, but indirectly give you the energy sources that you need to push more strength and more weight to build more muscle. So carbs are really important. The carbs that I like to use, sweet potatoes, all organic. Sweet potatoes, regular baby red potatoes, white potatoes in general are superior because they actually serve as a probiotic for the gut as well. And the way you can actually optimize the potato is if you cook the potatoes and then you let the potatoes cool down, what you're doing is creating what's called a resistant starch. So it means your body can actually use those carbohydrates effectively, but not getting all of the sugar and the glucose from the starch itself, because in that cooling down process, the carbs get partially digested in the gut and the rest slips down into the lower colon, which is where all of our good bacteria sit in the lower colon of our body. And when the potato goes down into the lower colon, the good bacteria feed off of that potato and colonize and spreads more good bacteria in the body. So that's how the potato works as a probiotic or a prebiotic as well for the gut. Other things that I'll use sometimes that are a little more easy to digest are organic jasmine rice or organic basmati rice. And why I'm specific on those two is because rice in general has a history of being sprayed with pesticides. And those toxic chemicals can be inflammatory to the gut, things like glyphosate. So Thailand and India generally have stricter regulations in terms of the toxic chemicals that they use in spraying their products and their crops. So they're usually cleaner even than in the US. So organic jasmine or basmati rice, I would use sometimes as well. Easier to digest on the gut, usually like a little easier to like meal prep and make. The downside of rice is that if you're eating rice a lot, they still can have some degrees of heavy metals in them. So you want to mix your carbs up in that way. Split between rice and potatoes. Those are generally my two go-tos. The other thing I'll use from time to time is sourdough bread. The ingredients in the formulation of sourdough bread is usually gentler on the gut from a gluten perspective as well. They're less invasive on the gut. So, breakfast time, doing a piece of sourdough toast if you wanted to, something like that would be fine. And then what was the other question regarding carbs? Oh, how many grams? I generally it depends on the individual. For for a client coming into the program, I will generally put them on a very moderate carb-based diet, meaning high protein, moderate carb. High protein would be within the grams target of their target weight for protein. The carbs will probably be somewhere in like the 50 to 60 grams range. And that would be a moderate dose. The goal is I want to get your body composition down as much as we're happy with, right? Like I want to see like, where do you like to live? Some people, if I drop their carbs too low, their energy's too low. So I gotta kind of moderate their carbohydrate intake based on the feedback, not just how they look, but also how they feel. Once we find a sweet spot of that combination of feeling good, happy with the body composition, then we can manipulate playing with bringing their carbs up and moving them around.
Yeah, you got three questions here. So first one from Jozu. I hope I said that right, or Hozu. Are you a fan of AG1 and other supplements? If so, which ones do you recommend? So AG1 and then a supplement conversation. And then probably a easy one from Rose. Is jasmine rice always organic, or where do you find it? So
jasmine
AG1.
Rice, yeah, jasmine rice is not always organic. So you have to look for that specifically. That just brings up another question or another conversation, just going back to the food in the grocery stores. When you're looking for, you got to make sure if the labels don't say the things that you're looking for on them, don't assume that they're there, right? Like some people will look at meat and see like organic beef, or they'll see it'll say grass-fed beef. If it doesn't say 100% grass-fed or 100% or grass-fed, grass-finished, then it's not 100% grass-fed meat. Because a lot of times, again, these food companies and manufacturers, they know that grass-fed is a popular term right now, but there's a lot of farms out there and curators that are raising cattle that are grass-fed, grain-finished. So they'll eat grass the majority of their life, and then they finish them off with grain. So they're still getting those inflammatory products passing through them pretty heavily towards the end. They overfeed them with grain at the end. So the products have to say 100% grass-fed or grass-fed, grass-finished. Organic, you absolutely needs to say organic on there if that's what you're seeking and looking for. Organic jasmine rice. You can buy organic jasmine rice at Costco, Whole Foods. We have stores here in the U.S. called Sprouts. It's kind of like a Trader Joe's. I think Trader Joe's even sells organic jasmine rice. So you look for it there. Hopefully that covers that topic. Going over to AG1, not a fan. This goes back to my conversation about juicing, right? You're missing all of the benefits of and the fibers that you would get from these foods to create that satiation. Now, where I would say, and also too, AG1 has been blown apart in all the data and research that it definitely doesn't contain all of what it says it supposedly has in it. Secondly, where I would advocate for it, for example, is if you're traveling and you're going to countries where there's not a lot of vegetables. They just don't have a lot of vegetables accessible, or you're concerned about the cleanliness of the food or the contamination. You might, for a week, bring some AG1 in a powdered form just to get some micronutrients while you're traveling. Even though it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, it might be enough just to get you over the hump and just fill in some of the gaps. But I wouldn't, when you're home, in the convenience of your home and you have full control of your environment, AG1 is not something that I would advocate for. Supplements that I do think are king, that would be priorities. Creatine is probably one of the top that I would add in as a main supplement for everybody, even for elderly people, because all the research now shows that creatine increases lifespan and longevity. Reason being is that creatine helps our bodies build and produce and hang on to maintain lean muscle tissue. And lean muscle tissue is attributed to building more strength, more stability, less likelihood of falls, especially for old people. So they're actually prescribing creatine to elderly people in nursing homes now as part of a supplementation process. So for men and women, I would absolutely have them taking creatine. Fish oils would be a top supplement for everybody across the board. A B complex supplement with extra B6 would be another one that I would incorporate. Make sure you're getting plenty of your B vitamins for energy, there are a lot of anti-inflammatory benefits in there. from a B vitamin perspective with the extra B6. Those would be a few of the top that I would incorporate. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Vitamin D3, K2 would absolutely be at the top of that list as well. Important and essential for building and strengthening the immune system. A lot of people don't get outside enough today, so like getting that extra D3 that you would normally get from the sun is necessary. The K2 in that is important because the K2 combined with the D3 helps to take calcium out of our arteries and place it more into the bony structures in the skeletal system, which is what you want. You know, we over time start to develop, if our diets aren't proper, we start to see arterial plaque build up, and that's where you see people running into like cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular risks. So taking a supplement that can help alleviate or extract some of that calcium and some of that plaque buildup inside the arteries is really beneficial. So those would probably be my top. I mean, I take a lot of supplements, but you have to really know and understand, you know, what you're taking, what you're doing from a supplement perspective, to really go to put together a really strong regimen. I mean, this is what I do for my clients. I do it for myself, for my wife, everybody, even my parents. But those would be like the top. If somebody's just looking for a general across the board, those would be the basics.
Stephanie's asking thoughts on probiotic supplements, like taking a probiotic, I would imagine, is a question.
Yeah, I think probiotics can be good. You know, if you're somebody who takes really good care of your gut, I don't think you necessarily need a probiotic, but if you're having issues with your gut, probiotics can be helpful. I use seed probiotic, which is it's a symbiosis probiotic, meaning they give you prebiotics and probiotics. It's a combination. They've got this really like unique patented capsule that has a prebiotic that it helps it pass through the intestinal tract without being broken at the capsule. So it releases down into the lower colon, where I told you where all your good bacteria live. So it feeds that lower colon with lots of good food to let the good bacteria colonize. So it's got a combination of prebiotics and probiotics in it. But I've had clients too before where we've introduced probiotics and it's actually made their gut worse. And that's the thing that's kind of tricky about probiotics, is that sometimes you can actually trigger a negative response and overgrowth of other bacteria in the gut that's just not agreeing with you. So it's not a go-to, it's not a staple that I incorporate for everybody. It's sort of like a unique case-by-case basis. And you have to, you know, it's important to kind of know with supplements out there today, there's so many companies out there across the board with all supplements that you really got to know who are the top manufacturers and suppliers, and you know what they're putting into their products to really understand and know what's good quality out there, because there's a lot of junk supplements out there.
I think a question that would be probably good for everybody, and something that has taken some time for me to figure out also, and I never really thought of health this way, but can you talk about the benefits of anti-inflammation and what inflammation does to the body? And I mean, I think a lot of people don't even know what inflammation means. Like, we just think, oh, I'm inflamed, maybe I'm sore, or I feel bigger, or I feel bloated. But like, what is inflammation and why is that so important for everybody?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's two things to think about with inflammation. Like, you can develop inflammation through like an injury. Like, think of like you sprained your ankle, right? Like there's an inflammation in your ankle. Not the kind of inflammation that we want, right? However, that inflammation is actually part of a healing process. So it's like, it's not the kind of inflammation that you would feel in your stomach or like noticing your digestion, but same thing with like lifting weights and exercising. When you're lifting weights and your muscles get sore, there's an inflammatory response that happens in the muscle that's actually necessary for building muscle. So if you mute that inflammatory response, you actually are hindering your body's ability to build more muscle. A good example would be cold plunging, right? Riley, you're very aware of this. He loves to cold plunge, but once he got a cold plunge and we started talking about it, I had to teach him there's a sequence and a strategy of how you incorporate cold plunging so it could be beneficial and not hinder the results you're looking for. So you want to make sure that after a hard workout, you're not jumping into a cold plunge right away, because you want to let that inflammatory response take over so it can do the work that it needs to do to bring all of the repairing mechanisms to the muscle so it can grow and get stronger. right? So it's really important in terms of to understand the distinction between those. And then the other type of inflammation that we're talking about is systemic inflammation. Inflammation that you might feel in your gut and your intestinal tract. Inflammation might show up like in your sinuses, like you might feel congested, or you might see your face puffy and bloated, or your stomach is distended. You might notice like brain fog, confusion, low energy. Like these are things that sort of show up from a gut inflammatory response. And that can happen from just poor nutrition, right? So like I said, consuming foods like eating chicken all the time on a regular basis, putting sauces on your foods like a sriracha and not knowing that it's got xanthan gum. Like you think about, well, what else am I eating that also has seed oils and gums in it that I'm not aware of, that I just keep dumping into my body, and I'm just overloading my system with inflammatory items that I am not even aware of. And so oftentimes you see people sort of scratching their head confused, like, I don't understand, like, I don't get what's going on in my body. And it's because they're not aware that you keep filling the pool of inflammation, not even knowing what you're putting in is causing it. And it's hard. Like it's not, and nobody should feel like stupid or like it's their fault, because this stuff is really difficult to understand and comprehend. That's the benefit of working with a coach, to be able to like really outline and show you where you're maybe missing the mark. I have clients that will send me food journals for a week. And I look at their food journal and go, well, this is why your gut's not getting better. Or this is why you look like you're still carrying a lot of excess weight around your waistline. It's just inflammation. In your mind, you're eating the right macronutrients, but you're using this type of tortilla. You're putting this type of sauce on. All these things have inflammatory items in them that are showing up. This is why you have diarrhea. This is why you're feeling, nauseous. This is why your energy is low, because when inflammation is high, it affects three major systems in the body. It affects your digestive system. So your digestive system is inflamed. It can't break down nutrients effectively and absorb nutrients efficiently to send it to your body, to the muscles, to the organs, to the brain, so that you feel strong and resilient and clear and focused. It also impacts your endocrine system, which is your hormone balance. So it can affect testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. It can cortisol, the stress hormone. Like it can affect all of these hormones in the body that can throw your system completely off. And the other thing it affects is your metabolic system. So you can feel like, man, I'm working so hard in the gym, I'm doing all these things right, but my body composition just isn't changing, because your metabolism is sludgy, because the inflammation is so high in your body. You're not able to absorb nutrients properly. You're not getting proteins to the muscle, where the muscle is actually building and getting stronger. Your muscle's actually atrophying, like weakening, because you're not getting the nutrients, because the inflammation is so high in your intestinal tract. So there's a lot of things that inflammation really can affect downstream. And that's why it's so important to get that under control. Once you get a sense and you're aware of what you're putting into your body, and you can start to feel the inflammation come down, which, by the way, can happen very quickly. You might not get systemically all the levels coming down quickly, but I would say within a week, inherently within a week, when I have clients jump on my program, is usually a pretty dramatic sense of feeling. My stomach feels less bloated, it's flatter, it's tighter, less bags under their eyes, their face looks tighter and leaner, because they're now taking good care of their body. They're reducing the inflammation. Their body can start to absorb all this amazing nutrients that they're consuming. They're sleeping better. Their metabolism is kicking up a little bit more. All these things just start to fire better in their body because the inflammation is low. They're starting to move in that right direction. You get 2-3 months of that going, you can't unfeel what that feels like. And so what starts to happen is you develop a higher degree of sensitivity to understanding how foods impact your body. Meaning, when you're inflamed, you might be eating sriracha on a regular basis, and you might not feel that trigger in your gut or in your body, because you're sort of immune to it. You don't have that sensitivity. But once you reduce the inflammation in the body, and then you start incorporating inflammatory items, the sensitivity is increased, so you can get that sense of what's going on. You have this like built-in governor now, that what's great about it is that you're no longer in control. of what you eat and how you operate and the choices you make, your body's in control. Your body's going to let you know what it likes and what it doesn't like, and then you make decisions based on that, which is the best place to be. Because if your body's making the decisions, it's just so much easier for you. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're the one who has to sit there and kind of like wrestle with the, do I want to have that pizza? Do I want to like eat that ice cream? You know, if you're wrestling with that, a lot of times we lose that negotiation, right? But if you've eaten pizza, if you haven't had pizza in a while, and last week you ate pizza and it didn't agree with you, and then next week a friend of yours is like, hey, you want some pizza? And you're thinking, nah, I'm good. I'm good. My body told me it is not cool with what's going on because I know all the stuff in there is, there's some inflammatory stuff going on, the gluten from this and I don't know what kind of cheese they're using. Like, I'm good. I don't want to deal with that. The decision becomes easy because your body's dictating what's happening, and what you care most about is how you feel, and you don't want to feel like crap. Once you feel good, you don't ever want to go back. But most people don't know how good it feels to feel amazing with a reduction in inflammation unless they've been down that road. So, you know, that's sort of a long-winded description of inflammation, but it also kind of gives you the path of like what's possible and how that can feel, and what the potential is for people down the road. And that's, for me, that's how I create lots of a lot of success stories and get people into this space where, you know, they're very compliant with their meal plans because their bodies are making the choice, and it's not about them trying to control anything anymore, like wrestling with decisions. It doesn't mean that you can never enjoy cheat foods. You'll get to a point in your life eventually where, you know, you got to sort of make the decision, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Sometimes it is. You know, sometimes it's a birthday, it's a celebration. You're like, let's do it. I already know what I'm going to feel, but I don't do this often. I'm going to take this run. You know, it's fine. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with the consequences tomorrow. But those consequences become less and less because the choices you make are better and better just based on how your body is feeling and operating and helping you make those decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I agree. Once you feel good and the inflammation is down, you certainly notice it when you incorporate other foods.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you've had so many experiences like that, Riley. I mean, it's taken you some time to get there, but I mean, that I feel like I just described you in a nutshell.
You did, yeah. How can people find you, Raquel? You wanna wrap us up? You're good at doing the wrap up.
We'll just say, well, first of all, thanks, Chris, for all the information. I know our community got a lot from you. And so, community Edge, if you guys want to screenshot, share, tag him, where can people find you? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. People, you can go to my Instagram at Chris DiVacchio. We provide some information on a daily there. So you get like little tips and tricks, and you'll see clients and different like motivation stories of what people are doing. So you can find me there on Instagram. And then also too, if anybody's interested in connecting and trying to learn more about the program, if you'd like to set up a consult, you can email me at P as in Peter, M as in Mary, B as in boy, life.com. So it's Chris at pmblife.com. Just send me a quick email and we can take some time to schedule a consult and talk more about the program if it seems like it's a good fit for you.
Awesome. And then for the rest that have stayed on, we have dropped the link for next week's call. You're not going to want to miss it. It is on productivity, streamlining productivity. And our speaker for next week will be Sydney. And she is going to rock out with how you actually could be more productive without all the hours. So thank you guys. And I hope you guys have an amazing Tuesday.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris.